telling Omar's story on the operatic stage is, I think, a great idea. I mean, opera is big. Opera is a format for big stories. It's not a format for Western stories, it's a format for stories.
People since the beginning of history have just loved to be told stories, and I think opera at its best does that as well as any medium we have.
And when you take it back to its roots, it is ultimately there to tell a story and to celebrate the voice and music and visual and all of it together, and that's what makes it such an amazing art form. The idea is that Omar is entering this sound world that he's never heard before, and it's also the idea that I'm a Black Southern composer, who plays the banjo. So that's the lens that I use.
The opera begins with the earliest known melody of enslaved people brought to North America. And that's a very deliberate choice. All through the opera we show the contributions that Black people have made to American culture in music. And so you hear slave melodies, you hear spiritual, you hear ragtime, you hear early jazz.
I really wanted to put in as many markers as I could of the music that I've been immersed in the last 15, 20 years.
It's a collaboration, ideally, of all the arts together to tell a story and to take people out of their everyday lives and take them into this world of the arts where everything is more vivid.
Opera ultimately should be about good tunes that tell a story that people want to sing. I'm a real purist when it comes to opera. I'm like,
opera is an amazing form that, to be quite frank, is lost on so many people. I didn't grow up going to the opera. That's not something that was part of my family's usual Sunday night, Saturday night, Friday, whenever people go to the opera. I don't know. That being said, opera is this amazing form because it can talk about such big things: love and war and death and culture and just the entire gamut of gods and monsters.
The opera is this form that's built on hundreds of years of exchange. And even the sounds that we've come to understand as classical sounds are built on hundreds of years of exchange. And I am interested in the hybridity of this form, a form dependent on many artists coming together and many artists collaborating, and this form that has held exchange for so long. And working in the opera, I'm interested in returning the form to itself. So whenever I start working on a piece, I think about the lexicons that we're gathering and the library from which we will collectively work to begin a conversation.
I think about the visual world of the piece. I think about the objects that go into the piece. In theater, it's a massive undertaking, especially opera. And so I get to think about what are the elements, kind of sculptural, structural, and visual elements that will bring this piece together, that will allow all of the conversations to happen, both between the artists and each other, the artists and the audience, and in the case of Omar, between the artists, the audience, and history itself.
I believe that great storytelling requires speaking many languages, and that those are cultural languages and aesthetic languages and creative languages and historical languages, and I would even say experiential languages that get brought into the room.
The central kind of element for the design of Omar is Omar's handwriting itself. It's rare that you get to get that sort of window into history, that kind of direct conversation with someone who has existed, whose life resonates with our life today. Telling this story, which is so central to so many of our existences as Americans, as people who have understood that cultural conflict and cultural meeting is the engine by which so much of culture happens. All of that, I hope, is the kind of thing that will bring opera to a wider audience, that will continue to last, because these stories are relevant, they're necessary. And I hope, if it's not Omar itself, I hope that an opera like Omar opens the door to 1,000 more operas, because these are conversations that we want to have with each other as a culture, and we're excited for it.
I'm John Kennedy. I'm the Director of Orchestral Activities and the festival's resident conductor, and I'm conducting the premiere of Omar this season. I think, we're having all kinds of social reckonings in the United States around our history and our past, and who is an American. By looking at that topic honestly and unflinchingly, we get a deeper insight into who we are as Americans. And Rhiannon, in her generosity and in her brilliance, has written a libretto that is about reconciliation and honesty. And for that reason, I think it really works.
I'm Mina Marcana. I'm the General Director of Spoleto Festival USA. We're in a moment of a cultural renaissance, and this piece is at the very tip of the spear of that cultural renaissance, because it is platforming the most marginalized voice in American history, that of an enslaved African in the Carolinas. And it is doing it in opera, which is an art form that is typically seen as the most hallowed, elitist form of arts that can exist. So the fact that we are bringing these stories into the opera house, we're not just creating an American art form, we're saving the art form for the entire world. That opera can mean more today than it has meant in the past, because we are telling today's stories.
I think what I will remember the most about this experience is the fact that this piece was done at this time in 2020 in Charleston, where this man was brought and sold. And I think it holds heavy significance to this area, to the Gullah Geechee people in this area where my grandmother was born. And I think that the opera will, if people are open, I think that it will garner much talk and much exchanging of ideas. And I believe that that's what art and culture does.
When I'm not in rehearsal, to be able to walk the streets and see where slaves were sold, and then to witness that scene in the opera, it's really surreal. I'm really glad that this opera will make its debut here in Charleston. I think it's really important that this is the location where it will be seen first. I hope that 10 years from now, this opera will kind of have served as the beginning of a trend towards seeing many more diverse stories about people of color, women, our LGBTQIA brothers and sisters. I hope that this is the beginning of many more stories being written about subject matter and about people that we don't normally see in opera.
It allows us the opportunity to exchange ideas and understanding of other people. And I'm hoping and hopeful that Omar will do just that, that it will allow people from different parts of the world and different religious backgrounds to sort of come together and understand that in the end, we're really all one. So I hope that happens with Omar.